Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to today's workshop, Future-Proofing Your Assessments, Responding to the Challenges Posed by AI. What we're hoping to do is sort of give you an overview of some of the challenges, as we mentioned, are posed by generative AI. And then more importantly, we'll talk to you about some solutions for thinking about those challenges. And I'm not sure if Laura is here. She may have had to step away for a minute, so I'm just going to keep going, and hopefully Laura will get back in just a second. We also want to welcome you to part of our ongoing AI Insights series. So this is a continuing series about AI's impact on teaching, learning, and academic research. Some of our upcoming workshops include a July workshop on fostering authentic online discussions in the age of AI. And then also in August, we'll be doing a workshop on custom AI chatbots. And if there are other topics that you'd like to explore, feel free to pop that in the chat or contact City and let us know if there's something that you'd like to hear about. Okay, so I'm one of your presenters today. My name's Emily Rush, and I'm an instructional designer for City. And I see that Laura's been able to join us again.
I'm back, thankfully. Hopefully I will stay. I'm Laura Smith, and also an instructional designer with City. I'm delighted to see all of you and see some familiar faces. So today, here are our learning objectives. You can, of course, read through them on your own, but essentially, we'll be looking at this through the lens of, or hopefully you'll be reflecting on your own discipline as it relates to incorporating or mitigating the use of AI in your assessments. We'll also be differentiating skills or tasks that can be augmented with AI assistance as we learn about AI's current capabilities. Describing strategies for mitigating AI use in assessment, and also evaluating the potential uses, challenges, and benefits of incorporating AI into your assessments. So we thought we'd start with a poll, just to get a sense of where you're at, a kind of pulse check of where you're at with AI. You know, we've been doing this for a while now, closing in on, goodness, well, I guess a year and a half, I would say. So we'd love to hear where you're at, and so we thought we would, especially using AI in your teaching. So Emily, if you wouldn't mind starting the poll. Hopefully you guys can see that. Asking you to rate where you're at with using AI in your teaching, from 1 being I've not even tried it, which is totally okay, to fully overhauling your curriculum with AI. Okay, so we're getting a nice range of experience from not tried it, a couple people, playing around, getting ideas. I think that's where a lot of people tend to fall, and augmented 1 or more assessments or activities with AI. That's wonderful. Okay, no one's yet overhauling their curriculum, which is what we would expect at this point, but great. Anyone, I think everyone has participated, it looks like. Okay, so thank you so much. That'll be super helpful as we move forward.
All right, so what I'd like to do is foreground a lot of what we're going to talk about in this quote from a recent book by Ethan Mollick, who's a leading voice on AI generally, and he's also a professor at University of Pennsylvania, Wharton. So he has a lot of experience in terms of education. And I apologize, some of his wording may not be ideal in terms of how he describes foundational skills, but I think here what the takeaway is, even Mollick, who is an expert in AI, he writes about it almost daily and shares his expertise, acknowledges that foundational skills, there's really no shortcut to being an expert. And that's something that we want to emphasize as City, that we recognize and highly value your skills and your disciplines and your domains. And we would never suggest that there's any sort of shortcut to the expertise that you have or that your students are working for. These are all very purposeful pursuits that require deliberate and sometimes study over a great deal of time. So AI doesn't change that, and we firmly believe that. Nevertheless, and I'll ask you to bear with me, this is the harshest quote or thing that we will say in the workshop, that even though there is no shortcut for expertise, it is also, I think, very likely that it doesn't matter if you're interested in AI, and it doesn't matter if you don't use it, that it will probably still impact your discipline in some way. So please don't get angry at the messenger as we relay it. Our goal is not to make you fearful. Our goal is just to show you some perspectives about AI and really to help you think about how we can cope with these challenges. All right, and so in that line of thought, what I'd like to do is give you a brief overview of some AI capabilities in terms of how they might impact education. And in order to do that, I want to back up a little bit and talk about AI, and specifically generative AI. We've done this in a lot of workshops, but I want to try it from a different perspective. And again, I'm leaning on Ethan Mollick, who describes AI as a general purpose technology. And that's not what GPT from the ChatGPT stands for, but he likens it to this kind of technology. And he says that we really ought to be thinking about it in terms of comparisons to steam or the internet, electricity, all these really fundamentally changing technologies, or as he describes them, as once in a generation advances that have tremendous impact across impact in industry and society. In terms of tools like large language models or ChatGPT is a good example, that these are highly transformative tools that he describes as co-intelligence because they can emulate human thinking and writing while producing a novel textual output. And Malik also talks about the rapid development and adoption of AI, which has been unprecedented compared to other technologies. And just in terms of thinking about the long-term applications of this technology, we want to keep in mind that leading scientists and mathematicians think that we will achieve something called artificial general intelligence by 2027. And this is sort of like the next leap forward in this kind of technology. So it's not just a technology that can mimic human writing and put together words in a way that sounds naturalistic, but it can actually think and learn and perform intellectual tasks in ways that human can, or maybe even better, which, depending on your perspective, is either really exciting or horrifying. Right. So what I want to do now with that sort of foregrounding about AI and its general implications is think more specifically about AI and teaching, learning, and assessment. And here again, I'm continuing to use Malik as my source. So AI can, on the one hand, enhance task completion and creativity in education. According to Malik's accounts, it can increase productivity by 20 to 80%. If you take issue with that, that's completely understandable because productivity is not necessarily a metric by which we evaluate education. But some areas in which that's relevant is producing writing in a more rapid manner, streamlining research, producing coding, or all sorts of problem solving. Perhaps more interestingly, one of the biggest benefits or things that AI can do in terms of teaching and learning is that it can scale personalized learning and student support. And this is a longstanding challenge in the field of education. Experts have shown that if students have access to personalized tutoring, it significantly increases their capabilities and their accomplishments within their courses. But for most of us, it's not possible to give one-on-one support to every single student. Going back to challenges, as you probably recognize since you're here today, that AI poses a challenge to traditional assessments for a number of reasons. First being that AI cannot be reliably detected. And if you have questions about that, I'll send out a resource after this workshop that we produced that talks about AI detection and why it's not really the best route to go. And so because of all of these impacts on teaching, learning, and learning, educators will likely need to adapt your assessments or their assessments and assessment method. And what I'd like to do right now is just talk a little bit about what are some AI capabilities that could perhaps impact your courses or your curricula. And I'm going to start with some general things. So for quite a while now, it's been very possible for anyone who uses Google Docs, Google Gemini. You just open it up a doc, and there's immediately a button that says "Help me write," and it can produce an AI-generated text on a topic based on your prompting. Or on the right, this is a screenshot of Microsoft Copilot. Similarly, you can put in a prompt, you can adjust the tone or style or genre, and immediately generate a text that you could quite easily copy into a Word document or whatever kind of document you're using. If you haven't been using AI for a while, one thing that might be surprising or perhaps alarming is that in late 2022, early 2023, AI had this tendency to make up stuff. But the reality is that it's gotten a whole lot better. And there are certain tools, if we move beyond ChatGPT, that can really effectively help with research. Or, depending on your perspective, it might start doing the work that your students can do. This is a tool called Elicit AI. And I put in a research question that is included on the left. And it immediately generated a very abbreviated literature review with references that link out to Semantic Scholar to actual text. My apologies, bear with me a minute. Somehow my mouse got really excited and jumped ahead.
It happens.
It does happen. Okay, so let's see if we can try this again. Okay, so I was talking about Elicit, and I was about ready to move on to AI has also now has features that makes it much easier for the user to customize the output or even adopt a persona that shapes the output. And so what we're looking at right now is ChatGPT, the version that's available to everyone, has a little box that allows you to customize the output and provide better responses. So I could customize my responses and say I'm a student or person in this discipline. And unless I specify otherwise, my audience is always X audience. I can also include specific instructions, as I've done here, to not include words that are very typical of AI output and that are kind of a giveaway that something is AI generated. So this has significant implications in terms of when we ask students to do writing that's personalized. They could actually use AI to do that pretty effectively. And we'll talk about that more in our discussions workshop. And then lastly, with AI's new multimodal features, which are common across a variety of tools, I can do things like take a quick screenshot or snapshot of a multiple choice quiz, upload it to AI, and ask it to tell me the answers and explain why those answers are correct. And that's what this screenshot represents. So there are a lot of capabilities that could potentially impact your courses, and I think it's helpful to be aware of those. And what we're going to do right now is, instead of talking about the challenges, what we'd like to turn to thinking about some assessment strategies that can help you respond to these challenges. And I think the first thing that All City would probably emphasize is that it's okay to start small, maybe just one step at a time. It is an overwhelming process. I think everyone would admit that. So some things that you might consider doing are just to choose one assessment at a time to modify. And also you might consider experimenting with low stakes assignments first. And then part of what we're also going to do is share some of your colleagues adaptations and successes, so giving you a chance to learn from your colleagues. In terms of trying to give you a more strategic framework, Laura and I actually spent a lot of time looking at a variety of frameworks, and we had a hard time finding what we would recommend the most. And what we decided upon was the most encompassing strategy that isn't overly prescriptive is to think about what are desirable difficulties in your class. So on the one hand, there are certain desirable difficulties that you would want in probably any educational setting, things that might encourage students to try to work through a challenge, encourages iteration, asks them to reflect on a problem or promote metacognitive strategies. And for these kind of desirable difficulties, you would probably don't need AI. You could certainly minimize that. On the other hand, there might be certain undesirable difficulties that you recognize in your courses or that you're frequently seeing your students encounter. And these are things that might frustrate students or actually create learning barriers. They might encourage grit for the sake of grit, which, depending on your perspective, may or may not be helpful. And so these are perhaps areas of your course where you might consider letting students use AI to sort of mitigate these potentially unnecessary challenges. All right, and Laura's going to tell us a bit about strategies for mitigating use of AI in your course.
Thank you, Emily. And before I do that, I wanted just to take a pause to see if there were any questions, any points of confusion or clarification needed before we move on. If so, feel free to drop them in the chat as always, or unmute your mic, raise your hand, and we can give you the floor. Would like to make this as interactive as possible, though, you know, we do have a lot of stuff we want to talk about, and we are eager to hear also from your experiences. So I'll just continue, and if there are questions, we'll address them as they come up. So as Emily suggested, I'll be looking at strategies for mitigating AI. And as we've been discussing, and as Emily has shared with you and its many current capabilities, know that unless you're giving a, an in-class handwritten or oral exam without the use of devices, no assessment is really immune from AI. So you may find in trying to mitigate AI use, you may be fighting a losing battle potentially, but there are certain steps that you can take to mitigate its use. And many of these really refer back to good course design principles, things that you probably already know in your teaching and in your experience teaching. And so I've narrowed it down to sort of 3 key strategies. Obviously, there are a lot more than 3 strategies that we could discuss. But there are 3 ones that really are at the top of my mind when I think about mitigating AI use in my instructional design practice and also in my teaching. So we'll take a look at these each individually, and then I will be sharing with you one example from 2 of your colleagues in the College of Nursing and how they have approached this challenge and attempted to mitigate the potential unauthorized use of AI in their course. So the first of these is making it meaningful, articulating the purpose. The students need to know why they are completing an assignment and how it's directed toward their learning goals. Explaining why an assignment is important, explaining why they should complete the work without the assistance of AI, and how it benefits their learning is really key. And something that Emily and I have been talking about a lot as we prepared for this session and other upcoming sessions is student motivation and intrinsic motivation and engagement. So that's really at the heart of this and a lot of these strategies and approaches that we'll be talking about today. Understanding why an assessment is critical to their learning in the course, how it's directed to student learning goals and course objectives, and what the purpose of undertaking such an activity or an assessment is really critical toward fostering motivation. And I think this really goes back to that framework Emily introduced earlier about desirable difficulties, right? You may also frame this as the concept of productive struggle, right? Needing to undertake such a struggle in order to develop mastery in a topic. And we know that difficulty is necessary sometimes when learning. So articulating to your students why this assessment requires a level of difficulty that it does, and that it must be undertaken by them alone is also really, is key to meaning and motivation. So, making it meaningful is that first one. Number two, and this strategy for me is really key, I found that it has been a really good first step at addressing AI and mitigating its use, unauthorized use, for example, in my teaching. And that is add opportunities for personalization and authenticity. And we know that AI can provide us with endless facts. And even though it can pretend to tell us what it's like to truly experience something or feel it, right? It can adopt that sort of persona or first person speech. It can't really do that, right? So giving your students opportunities to apply what they're learning to their own real world and experiences and perspectives is really key. And this may include opportunities for reflection, even first person accounts, not being afraid to allow students to use first person pronouns such as I in their writing, for example, in say a discussion post or a reply to their peers. And this strategy is really integrally connected to the first, right? Because often assessments become more meaningful when they are more authentic and allow for more personalization. As we know, as teachers and learners, when we're able to put our true selves into something, we're often more intrinsically motivated to invest the time and care needed to do it well. So these two strategies, and really all of these, are really clearly tied together. And then onto the third one, giving adequate time, resources, and support. So as you've likely seen with students, with maybe academic integrity violations, they often tend to happen when students maybe they feel rushed or overwhelmed, or they don't fully understand an assignment or how to complete it. In these instances, they may turn to AI to do it for them, right? So giving adequate time, resources, and support to students, throughout the course, but specifically for an assessment, making sure they have the necessary tools they need to succeed, and that their grade reflects the work that's entailed in that assignment. And the weight of that grade in their overall coursework reflects the time that it would take to complete it, is another strategy I found to be very useful in mitigating AI use. Any questions about these three key strategies? Now we're going to sort of look at how a use case of how these strategies were sort of considered in the revision of a specific assignment by one of your peers. Emily, if you want to go ahead and advance, and again, feel free to ask questions or unmute if you have them. Okay, just 1 second here, just getting situated. Okay, so with the permission of Drs. Christy Lawrence and Ramona Hunter, two faculty in the College of Nursing that I frequently work with, I guess it's been about 1.5 years or so ago, they had a longstanding assignment in their course, essentially kind of like a book report, where they had students write about a book you may have already read. It's a wonderful book by Rebecca Skloot called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And for a long time, they had students write a book report on that and submit that as a final kind of summative, or one of the final summative assignments. they began to encounter some concerns, not necessarily due to academic integrity violations, but with the advent of AI, we know AI can, as Emily has shown us, very easily write us a book report, a well-written one. So that, among other concerns, such as, this being a very large class, and this is, again, I did not introduce it, but this is a nursing class called Women's Health Across the Lifespan. A very large class, grading of these papers became very time consuming. There was maybe the potential for academic integrity issues, especially with the advent of AI. And also with the assignment, because it was a final summative paper completed individually, there weren't really any opportunities for discussion and collaboration. So we began to rethink the assignment and how they might, mitigate those potential risks. And in doing so, we came up with a podcast assignment. So if you would advance the slide to the next, slide. So really, we sort of approached it, from the perspective of, does this have to be a paper? Maybe there's something else that students could do, could accomplish these learning goals in a different way that might make, but that might incorporate these strategies I've just discussed about personalization and authentic learning, and without having to write a paper, right? And so we landed upon this idea of creating a group podcast. So the revised podcast group assignment was implemented in fall of 2023. They've taught it a couple of times now, and Drs. Lawrence and Hunter couldn't be with us today, but I'm sure they'd be happy to share and discuss these changes and how it's gone since, if you're so interested. So what happened was students took the book and some of the assignment prompts from The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lack's book report, and developed questions and talking points that were aligned with the stated and revised learning objectives. In their groups, they collaborated on their group's Canvas pages. Each assumed a particular role in the creation and editing of the podcast episodes, such as interviewer/host, project manager, writer, editor, engineer, designer. And they also completed a group contract, which they submitted as a kind of stating their roles clearly and what they would be held accountable for. In the assignment guidelines, we gave them lots of suggestions and resources on tools, their equipment that they may need, which wasn't much really, because they produced much of this through just a simple Zoom session, and provided all of this to students at the start. So again, going back to that third strategy of providing students with the necessary resources and tools and time needed to produce something they would be proud of. And so their final submission was each student submitted a recording of their episode and an outline of the conversation. But students really ran with it. They did a lot more than just that. They created artwork for their episode. They added music. They added, I think, commercials even. So they really got creative with the output or with the final episode. And added a lot of personalized elements to it that were not required, but really made it the assignment exciting. So in such an instance like this, AI use is not impossible, right? But using some of these strategies suggested, such as, personalization, making it meaningful, authentic learning, providing necessary resources and tools, the temptation for unauthorized use of AI was possibly lessened, and also made the assignment, I think, more exciting and fun for students to complete. And one more slide here, just after this one here. Thank you, Emily. I wanted to share just the first part of the assignment description, in which the purpose of this assignment was articulated. Again, going back to that strategy of helping students understand why what they're doing is meaningful, how it relates to their course goals, their learning goals, but also how it relates to their future kind of professional goals. And so we propose such questions as, how will Lack Story impact your role as a clinical nurse leader? And clearly articulated the purpose as a means of, again, making the assignment more meaningful for students, so that they would have a full understanding of what it meant to do, a good job on this assignment and produce something that they would be proud of and could share outside of the course. So that's just one example, but I'm sure there are many more, and perhaps you have your own examples to share of how AI use was mitigated in one such assignment at the College of Nursing. Any questions about that? All right.
All right, so I'm going to talk about some strategies and give some examples of ways that you might incorporate AI. And I'm going to start from sort of the lowest stakes and lowest, what I see as the lowest possible impact or effort level on your class, and build up to some higher stakes assignments. And I want to particularly highlight examples from your fellow faculty members. And starting with sort of a low stakes way that you might incorporate AI is to use a set of discussion questions that Citi has created about different aspects of AI in healthcare. And you can see some examples of these questions on the screen. What we've done is created about 20 discussion questions on varying topics that pertain to AI ethics in healthcare, and divided them by topic and also into beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. So there's a range of topics, and if anyone would like to use them, or even better, if you would like to give us feedback and help us refine these questions, we'd be eternally grateful, I think. But this is what I think is sort of, maybe you're not quite ready to have your students full on use AI in your course. So a good step could be to have conversations about AI as part of your course. Another sort of low stakes way to allow your students to use AI goes back to what I said earlier about personalized learning and feedback. And we also have created a user guide full of about 5 pages of prompts that allow students to use different prompts to get feedback or to test their knowledge or skill in a particular area or subject domain. I'm sharing my favorite example from that document. So this is something that students could use to create basically an adaptive game that will check their knowledge of a particular area. And depending on how well you answer, the questions will get increasingly difficult. And if I'm going too quickly, please certainly let me know and I can go back to something. Another strategy, and this is something we'll talk about a good deal more in August, is the possibility of creating custom chatbots for personalized learning and feedback for your course. And these are often, this is a way of using AI in a more focused way, and oftentimes more faculty are more comfortable with this particular use of AI because they might have a little bit more input on the training data for a tool. So some specific roles that custom chatbots could play in a course could be a course assistant that just helps your students navigate the course, and it can help them ask questions with the benefit that it can do that 24/7. If there's a particularly challenging assignment on which your students frequently have a lot of questions or confusion, you could create a tutor for a specific assignment. If you're working on a project or an assessment that has a number of steps, you might work with a Citi ID to create a process coach, or you could have a reflective guide that sort of walks students through sort of different metacognitive responses to a particular assignment. All right, so now I'm going to highlight some examples from Rush faculty, and I'm going to start with a lower stakes intervention. This was an assignment that I helped support Dr. Megan Moran in her revision of this assignment for undergraduate anatomy. And basically what she did is previously As part of the exam review process, students would submit study questions or sample test questions to prepare for the exam. And we had a conversation that it did bring up the topic of desirable difficulty. And she said that students would frequently struggle with that, and their sample questions weren't particularly effective. And so after that conversation, I suggested that maybe they could use AI to develop study questions using specific criteria, which is what Dr. Moran did. And part of the assignment was not just to use AI to create questions, but also students had to explain the answers and critique the answers. So I feel like this is another really good low stakes way of using AI for formative assessment. A second example from a Rush faculty member is one by Dr. Paula Jo Bellis, and this is from a professional writing course, a graduate level course. And I believe Paula Jo worked in conjunction with Peg, who's probably on the call. And basically what they did through this collaboration was they took an assignment that was previously an expository writing paper that consisted of a draft or an outline and draft. And what they did is they built in more scaffolding throughout the process, adding sections with peer review, but they also used AI as a peer review so that the students received more feedback throughout the writing process. Students were also allowed to use AI for specific things like outlining, and if I recall correctly, they could use it for occasional paraphrasing, but not for producing large quantities of text. And Paula Jo also had a number of conversations with students throughout the process, assessing their attitudes regarding AI. And she noted a fascinating shift in terms of the students' disposition towards AI throughout the process. So this, I think, highlights a way of using AI for offloading certain aspects of writing or research that might be challenging for students and giving them greater opportunities for feedback, but not letting them just turn over all of their thoughts or their work to AI. And I have one more example from a faculty member. This is from Dr. Nadine Larrett, also from CHS. And I apologize, I'm not sure if she collaborated with a city staff member, but basically what she did is previously her students would be required to create a case study that would consist of patient signs, symptoms, and demographics, and other important information. And how she transformed that was she allowed them to use AI to create a case study and to assess all the content because she recognized how easy it would be to do this work with AI. They did have to differentiate the AI content versus their own content in the submissions, and they also had to include a video presentation in which they reflected on the process and the results of their case study. And so what we see here is this is a higher stakes incorporation of AI into an assignment, but this is something that I think unfolded with Dr. Larrett having ongoing conversations with her students about their previous use of AI and recognition about what AI could do, and considering if the previous assignment was effective in light of AI. All right. If we think about your colleagues and peers more broadly outside of Rush, I also want to draw your attention to this wonderful resource. It's an AI assignment library from the University of North Dakota. And again, I'll share this resource when I send out items after the workshop. But essentially what this is part of an ongoing process in which University of North Dakota faculty completed workshops on assessment design or redesign. They then created assessments and peer reviewed their colleagues' submissions. And once they did that, they then added them to this assessment library. And although they come from a variety of disciplines, as you can see on the screen, I know it's a lot of text, but we see representative assignments from DNP, there's some medical lab assignments. I think there's another nursing assignment somewhere on this page. So if you're intrigued by this possibility, this might be another good resource to explore. and see what faculty at other institutions are doing as well. All right, so I'm going to wrap up what is the didactic portion of the workshop by saying that as you start thinking about how to approach assignments and if you want to adapt or adopt different strategies, some questions that you might return to, just thinking about that issue of desirable difficulty are things like alignment. So if there's difficulty, does the difficulty align with the skills being developed? Is the skill or competency relevant for the students? And is the difficulty level appropriate? You might also think about, can AI help personalize it? Or generally, is AI appropriate? Are there any questions before we move on to a more interactive part of today's workshop? All right, if you think of any questions, certainly feel free to pop them in the chat, unmute yourselves. Oh, there's a few comments. Okay, I think they're mostly comments from our wonderful city staff. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. And Laura, were you going to introduce the work session?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So we thought we would take the next, I don't know, like 10 or 11 minutes to work through some questions to guide our thinking about how to effectively either mitigate or incorporate AI in our assessment design. So we developed this short work session with a worksheet to sort of walk you through those steps. Emily just shared that worksheet in the chat. Thank you so much, Emily. And has also provided here, as you can see on the screen, how you can download and save that and reuse it on your own. Because obviously this is a lengthy process that you won't be able to, of course, accomplish in the next 11 minutes. But so first, we'd love you to begin sort of individually reflecting on the questions posed in the worksheet. Considering how, or even if AI can be integrated into any one or more of your assessments. Then we hope to have a bit of group discussion, sharing reflections on the core competencies and those that might be augmented with AI. Discussing the purpose and learning objectives of your selected assessments, and identifying potential uses, challenges, and enhancements of AI in your assignment. So Emily, were you thinking of we'd break people up, or just have some moments for quiet reflection and then discussion?
I think right now we have a small number of faculty, so maybe we can just have a few moments of quiet reflection, or if faculty have initial responses, certainly you can encourage them to unmute themselves or put their responses in the chat.
Yeah, I wonder if we should share, should you want to share the worksheet in case we want to talk through some of those questions together?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let's see. All right, can you see that?
Yeah.
Great.
So sort of the idea, I think, of this discussion activity, and Emily, feel free to elaborate, is I think going back to some of our learning objectives for the session and some of the things we've already talked about, right? At first, identifying those fundamental competencies in your discipline in an effort, I think, to determine what are some of those desirable struggles and undesirable struggles that could be identified in order to determine whether or not mitigation of AI use or augmentation is needed. And then looking at individual assessments and analyzing their specific purpose. You may have one in mind, or you may just want to generally think through how you might do that. And then if AI integration is appropriate in part 3, how might you incorporate AI? And remember, as Emily suggested, you can start small. It doesn't have to be an overhaul, as we suggested in the initial, or, included in the initial poll. Really, it can be just one small, maybe low stakes or no stakes formative assessment to sort of just try the inclusion of AI in your course and see how it goes to determine how to move forward. And sorry, I'm talking over the quiet reflection time, but just wanted to briefly comment on that.
And you'll have to pardon me, I'm also going to talk over the quiet time. If this is certainly a lot to take in, so we certainly don't want anyone to feel pressured or feel like you just want to run away or leave the Zoom room. If Laura's amenable, I think it's also okay if you just have reactions to this workshop, to this process. I know it can be overwhelming and emotional, or maybe even have a strong visceral response to this idea. So if that feels like a more comfortable starting place, we could certainly start there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great suggestion. Any general responses or initial thoughts or impressions about the use of AI, or how to mitigate AI in your courses and specifically in your assessments?
Sure, I have a question. It's Clayton.
Clayton?
I think, Laura, you may have mentioned the use of some of these strategies with group discussions in a course, where the goal is to get people to react not only to the assignment material, but then to each other. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. That's a great question. And Clayton, I believe you use discussion forums pretty heavily in your teaching. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. Yeah. And we will be talking more at length about discussion forums in the age of AI next month, because it is a big topic and one I think that is often not addressed and one that's obviously at the top of mind for a lot of us who teach online almost entirely, right? Or, blended courses. So I think if I understand your question correctly, going back to one of the strategies I introduced earlier in the session about opportunities for personalization and authentic learning, is that what you're speaking to?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
As a place to start.
Yeah, I mean, are you thinking of ways to incorporate that in your discussion assignments? Okay. Yeah, I think there are a lot of really interesting or different approaches that you could take with and without the use of AI. And one thing, just to one good first step, I think, is just to allow for personalization in the discussion process, even down to the encouraging students to use the first person and reflect on their own experiences. Using a discussion for what it's intended for, not necessarily a place to write a mini paper, right? But for as an opportunity to sort of interact and engage with each other's experiences and perspectives. It looks like Peg has a comment.
Hey, Laura, thanks. I just wanted to riff off of what you were just saying, because that's essentially what I recommend anyway with discussion boards, right? Like, part of our goal is to try to figure out a way to get them to see it not as a place to deposit information as much as it is a place to critically think about and reflect upon that information. To that end, you can use AI in a situation like that by asking them to I would do a scavenger hunt with AI, for example, in my discussion forum. So like I would send them out to find something on the internet that was pertinent to what I was trying to get them to think about. And then I'd have them put it through a process of revision through AI of some sort, for example. So, like, it might be a process document. It might be I don't know, a case study of a patient, whatever. I'd have them use that AI as a foil. And you can even tell AI to do that for you, right? Present an argument and then give a counter argument. So, I mean, that's just one way of doing it. And what you're doing when you do it that way is you're forcing the student to handle the information not once, not twice, but really 3 times, right? Because they have to process what you're asking them for. They have to accomplish the first part of the task, which is go out and find the resource and assess it for its veracity. And then the third part of that, and the third time they handle it, is when they assess what the AI has done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. That's very helpful.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Peg. I mean, there's so many, I guess it depends on the nature of the discussion that you want to augment or transform to some degree. I love the idea of a scavenger hunt. I think that AI tools can be really useful in discussions as a kind of a way to sort of brainstorm and kickstart ideas, find things that they may not know how to seek out otherwise. And then bring that into the discussion. And then, as Peg suggested, have students sort of debate the veracity and the relevancy of that response. You could, even as I believe we've suggested in other resources we developed, have students use different AI tools, plug the same question into those AI tools, and compare and contrast the responses, the outputs. They don't even have to be writing, right? Maybe they could create an image and compare, or images generated, or videos. AI is becoming very adept at creating videos based on prompts. So there's lots of potential for AI incorporation in discussion while incorporating personalization, right? And opportunities for authentic learning.
Right. And Emily mentions too the use of a citation, which I think is important.
Yeah, that's a really good, I'm glad you brought that into the discussion. Yes, absolutely. If you are encouraging AI use, teaching them how to use it responsibly and citing it as a source is really critical, or some sort of disclosure statement. Yeah, Emily, did you want to speak to that any more at length?
Sure. Yeah, I was just looking for an example of an AI disclosure statement because I realized we didn't have one in this workshop, but we can put it in the resources. What I've seen a lot more and more for other instructors or institutions that permit the use of AI for certain assessments is that in any assignment where a student uses AI, they have to disclose their use of AI, which might include a discussion of what tools or systems they used and the ways in which they used it.
Yeah. I think also allowing or even encouraging, I waver on the value of requiring different types of media in discussion responses, right? But having students respond in video form or audio form, is another, I think, good way to not necessarily mitigate AI use, potentially, yes, but also incorporate their own, also personalize any activities, right? So that, again, they're not just writing a mini paper or regurgitating facts about a topic that really is not the nature of a discussion, right? And reminding them of that, I think, is key, right? A discussion is a place for us to talk about what we know about this topic and what we're learning, not really for us to share mini papers and that we've written with one another. Peg, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I don't. I think I hit raise hand by accident.
Okay. I saw you unmute your mic, so I just wanted to be sure that you you had a chance to share if in fact you wanted to elaborate.
No, I elaborate far too often and for far too long.
Oh, Catherine, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, we will definitely be emailing slides and any other resources we've shared in this session. And I love your example about sharing an AI disclosure statement. That's a great suggestion. We can do that.
Actually, this one isn't an accident.
Okay.
We were speaking about, copywriting, not copywriting, but modeling and citation and all of that. And I really feel like it's super important if we're as faculty, we need to model that behavior as well. So don't hesitate to, just my little quick plug, don't hesitate to use AI yourself, play around with it, see what it does. As long as you're disclosing it to your students and showing them responsible use, I think it's a really good exercise for us as faculty as well.
We're coming up near 2 o'clock. Should we wrap up? I can certainly stay after if anyone has a few questions, and I don't know if you're able to do so, Laura.
I am, yeah.
The other thing that I will share a link so you can peruse it and see if it seems appropriate for your use. Is this is a strategy suggested by educational expert Leon Furtz. He's the one that had the somewhat harsh statement earlier about how there are very few assignments that are immune to AI. And so this is his 4-step strategy for what he calls attacking your assignment and sort of sussing out its vulnerability to AI. And so this is just a workflow that you could do to determine that if you like, or I highly encourage you to work with a staff member. I know we would all be more than happy to help you. And I know I went through that quickly, my apologies, but I will send it out. We also have, when we send out the slides, these are all the resources for different things that City has mentioned or used. And apologies, it's apparently time for the trash truck, so I hope you can't hear it or it's not too loud.
I cannot hear it, Emily.
Okay, that's good. We're so delighted that you can join us today and be part of this conversation in terms of thinking about assessments. We would really appreciate it if you could complete our survey. And I don't know if you have ready access to the link to the survey or the workshop, Laura, but if you do,
Just put it in the chat.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'm happy to take questions if people have other questions.